Hey, I Am Legion Reborn and I Am Legion mods for Dying Light 1 and 2 and Dead Island. And then I'm also working on this new tool that I'll be showcasing and continuing to work on here today, the Infinity Designer, which is a custom character creator, player creator, NPC creator tool that I've been working on over the last couple of weeks. It's been going really well. It's a really fun project. Getting a little bit further down the road with it and should be releasing here shortly to the public. I'm continuing to get out versions to the Patreon supporters as we go. And so I'm continuing to try to get in feedback loops for what you guys are seeing and what I can improve before trying to get these tools out to everyone. And so let me just really quick, I apologize, let me make sure my stream is actually working here. It doesn't look like it's actually live, so let me just double check. I always have to check these things now before I spend too much time, just because me and YouTube don't seem to be getting along lately. So let me see if we can just verify that everything is working. All right, there we go. All right, and I'm going to share out a few links so people can come in and ask questions while I'm working. So if you're not part of the Discord channels, so I'm part of the I Am Legion Discord, of course, you can always come in and ask questions about the mod and my ongoing work. And then also, of course, the Dying Light 2 modding servers are also a great resource for finding out what everybody's been working on. A lot of great tools have been actively being developed, and so excited to see what comes. This is going to be an exciting year, I think, for the modding community. And then also we have guns coming out tomorrow, so pretty exciting to get back into Dying Light 2. All right, and let's get, it's a little outdated at this point, but I do still have, well, thought I had a post on here still, but I'll come back to that part, and then I'll also share on my server in case people want to come watch. All right. So what I've been working on, so 0.3a came out recently. I guess that would have been about last week. There were some challenges with that version because I was learning how to basically set up the data storage and the output for all users and kind of how that would be updated over time. So kind of setting up how you would create your characters and store your characters inside the engine and then also manage updates. So I've continued to push the updates or push the work as far as I can while also trying to support, bugs that people have been finding. And so since the 0.3a release, this is probably more like 0.7 at this point. I'm pushing hard for 1.0. And the idea is that by the time 1.0 hits, all the bugs will be eliminated from the process of creating the character, and this system will be pretty seamless. I've run into some challenges along the way of just like, how do you support so many different designs and so many different modifications. And some of the things that I am happy to report is I ran into a bug that really cost me about 4 days worth of effort, which was being able to support this idea of generating variation on any character, any material, any piece of armor, and designing your own materials inside the engine. I am happy to report that that has now been fully completed. So you can actually now use the engine to go in here and create any material that you want by modifying the current materials that are available. So you can basically send in modifications to any material inside the engine that's supported on any of the NPC characters or player characters. And the result of this is that you are basically able to create all sorts of amazing different combinations of things. And I'm super excited to see what the community comes up with after this. So one of the things I'll be working on, so right now I'm working on this idea of just being able to show what you'll be clicking and kind of what you'll be loading in. Everything is now being populated onto the sliders. So say, for example, if you do have like a character here that you want to load, you don't actually have, so for example, if we go in here and say, it's going to go to man, and let's say Abdul, so that's Hakon, and then we've got head selected in the filter. So if I go over here and click him, what it'll do is it'll immediately load in all of his settings onto the head slots. So now all of these slots are now configured to be Hakon. So if we wanted to actually mix and match any uniform, any outfit inside the game. So say, for example, we just got started there. So say I wanted to bring in any armor elements that this one character is wearing, which I don't think he is wearing anything that I would technically deem an armor element. And you can see the notification system there is letting me know. But essentially, I can go into every specific slot and load in that content. So say I wanted to only load in a very specific subset of data onto any one of these characters. For example, if we go over here to like man, and then we have like a bandit that we really like the bandit, you should be able to actually go in there and select the element that you want to load in. And then I think it's actually got caught in a loop here. Let me see here. Oh, I see what it is. So here's another part of this, and so even it's, for me, I'm still using it and figuring out the flow. But essentially, I'm trying to support that you can mix and match any of these. For the sliders, there is still the split between the player sliders and man and female. The reason for that is because the player materials will still have the clipping issues. And so in order to properly load these in, the only reason that Hakon worked actually is because they released a skin of Hakon for the player. But once we actually go in here and select man, which they have to match up, so we have category man, and we have category man on our presets, you can then load in this specific character's content onto your player here. So if we switch to, for example, the accessories for the head, and then we click it again, it will go and switch to, say he's got like a scarf here or a hoodie, and it'll kind of mix and match. So as you go, if you have a specific character that you really enjoy, a specific thing about them, such as like, a specific pair of pants or a PK uniform, for example. So if we go in here to the filter and we say PK, and we have a specific outfit that we like, you can actually go in here and we'll only change those specific items so that they have a PK uniform. And then for the collar, to get rid of that, we'll also go here and select that as well. And so this person now has all the accessories that this person does. Now, he also still has the hair mix and match between Hakon, and so we can remove that. And to show a little bit more of what I was talking about with the custom materials, let me show you guys what the end result of all of this long effort, 4 days worth of effort to get this working. Let me show you what that looks like. So if we go in here, we'll remove that bandana. Say we want to make a more modern soldier, which is not present in the game. We want to modify this helmet. So we go in here and we say armor helmet. We'll press this button here up top, which will actually select the different ones. You can also use the keyboard bindings to select the different sliders and scroll through them now. And then also you can mix and match. So the first slot is, for example, the helmet. So if we wanted a guy with a gas mask, we can start with him. So let's build out a soldier and kind of look what that would look like. So essentially we'll go here and select the helmet. And then for the material up top, they've got, let's zoom in here so we can see it. So they've got this diffuse map that adds a little bit of the damage around it, but some of that may also be like the spec map. And so you may not actually get a lot from the diffuse map. So we'll actually find out. So if we hit if we type in camo here, and you can see here we have our textures load in. So I actually went shopping for you guys and loaded in an additional around 4,000 more textures into the engine. So this next version will have a bunch more textures. That a lot of these were more world element textures and things that you would want to apply to create even more diversity. So if we wanted a rusty helmet, you can now type in something like metal and get a large amount of different metal textures that you could use. So if you wanted like a rusty helmet, you can immediately get something like a rusty helmet for any of your guys. But let's go back to that modern idea. So we select this and we get like a camo. That one looks like the texture, they probably have a smaller UV area that's applied to this model. So if you wanted to go in here and actually apply like one that's maybe a bit smaller, I have added this drop down. So they don't have a ton of textures that are specific to camo, but what they did have, I believe in this list, and I want to add a setting here that'll make it to where, let me first go in here, and I think that's where I had that selected, that specific slot. So there are a couple more. You can see here that like there's an index. So these were used for pants. So there are some other ones that they've applied very specifically to some pants inside the game. So say we want to use this one because that applies to that. The tiling applies a little bit better to this helmet. Here's one with a bandage, so you can actually get some interesting details going here. So then we have our new diffuse here, and I am really curious. I've not tried to set an index on this one yet. So let's go here and say man PK head, and let's set this material back really quick. So up here we have this index. So you can actually load in an index to do an offset on this data. So if we go in here and say camo, and it did apply, but not much happened there, that might be a good thing. And then if we say something like a gradient, so I actually really enjoy this. So there's still, you can see there I had to click that a couple of times to get that to load in proper. There's still some like fine tuning I have to do with the actual these actual interfaces, and so that's where a lot of this work has been going, is just slowly refining and improving these. But you can see here that we can now actually apply color to this helmet, and so you can actually immediately go in here and start to generate all sorts of different patterns using those layers to your advantage here. So there's actually a very large amount of diversity in different fatigues, military fatigues, that you could create by applying these different layers like this. And it's kind of up to the users to start to select different things and see what the results are. I noticed that it appears that these didn't really apply to that camo pattern very much. Feels like the camo pattern actually is no longer. Let's try this. It's still there. It's just really interesting how some of these actually grab. So I've gotten fairly close to how they've got the UV set up with the index system. I think I'm pretty damn close at this point. but these are still meant to be kind of a rough representation of what it'll look like in the game. So what I've tried to do to expedite that process so that you can see what this looks like very quickly. Let's go here and we'll also grab this, let's see, this is going to be the helmet accessory. Let's go here to this gas mask and we'll actually apply something to this one as well. And then do the same here. And so really before releasing to everyone, I also want to try to improve some of that, some of this UX stuff as far as like what you have to click in order to apply the different things. Obviously, I don't want people getting frustrated, you know, just kind of randomly clicking the different elements to make things work. So let's see here. So, and then with the gradient, most of these are actually designed for different specific armor sets. So you probably won't be able to find one that's going to be, I mean, I might be able to type in something like green and you get like the actual, you know, set colors. But as far as like finding the one that is going to be the exact match for kind of the style that you're wanting, you have to just kind of mix and match and play with it to see which one. And so what I'm also trying to add before the official release is actually being able to go in here and right click specific textures to kind of add them to a favorites list. So in between sessions, you can end up with ones like up at the top so that you can always come back and review. So let's load into the game and see how this played out. So we have a new save system as well. So if you want to go in here and create a custom character or a player, you can go and do that. The idea here is in the future that will actually be set up with an online store so that you can actually go a free store, but you can actually go and share your creations as well. So still work in progress, but essentially by hitting that save button, it should already be loaded into the game. So we can go ahead and just hit play. And we'll see what this looks like. So like I said, I haven't actually applied an index before to this one, and you guys can actually see. So when I'm creating this, I like to use fork to kind of check these things as we go, just because, for example, with this one, I don't actually know that player wasn't the correct player. It's this one. That's an old one. So it's writing all this data, and it did apply an index and it did apply a gradient. So let's see how that turns out in the engine, the game engine rather. So the stripe showed back up where we didn't set that one material to null. So that will have to actually get adjusted to where for that very specific helmet, you'll need to set that secondary layer to null, or when it reads in, it will add the stripe by default. So if you wanted to add a very specific military look that did not involve the PK side, you could do so. And it doesn't really look like it applied over. So they have this, and it's actually been an interesting one. So part of the game is actually overriding some of the things that is already in there. For example, with this, as you can see, when I loaded mine in, it didn't show the stripe. So let's go and look here. If we go back to the armor helmet, go back to variation, you can see here in the second slot, it did actually have this material, which I'm curious why that didn't actually show up. So let me say, it'll wipe my adjustments there, but I did notice that it doesn't look like that head decal is actually showing up. But for example, we can set that to null, and that will actually remove that. For the gas mask is not actually in the game. They didn't actually use that one inside the game at all. And so as far as this goes, we may need to, let's try something different. So let's apply, because that didn't really do much. So we will instead apply a diffuse map. And for that diffuse map, we can actually use that same index. So let's go in here and say camo. I also noticed that the pants didn't show up for whatever reason. Let's see, not found. Yeah, it looks like my search term is no longer working as I originally had it. Just set that back up. It's supposed to update when you press the button. All right, and then for the gradient, we'll go in here and apply, something like a red gradient, something really obvious. Let's see if we can get one to actually apply to the, there we go. It's interesting that that one applied that. Let's do something like that. And then, as always, you can also go in here and save the variants. So whatever you create for these different ones, you can actually hit this Save Variation button. And what that will do is that in the future, when I come back to this helmet, I can now set that immediately. So those changes will now immediately get applied to that helmet. So for the foreseeable future, I have that design kind of saved in the engine. And I'm still looking at a way that you can update the code content, what I've actually updated over time, without worrying about losing your different creations. So let's go ahead and hit save again and hit focus all. And then actually, before we do that, for the gas mask, let's go back to the gas mask. We'll hit focus. And for this one, it doesn't give the option to change that, which I think it's the mask. It doesn't have a mask. It has the occlusion, the normal, and the diffuse. I know that the diffuse, if we go in here and say gas mask, I know the diffuse doesn't have those stripes. So you can see it doesn't have the stripes applied. So either they're applying it through, let's go up here and set this to null really quick, and then hit this again. Make sure that gets reapplied. I'm still working, you can see here where it doesn't look like the actual changes that I had set to the textures there were showing up. There we go. So I've added this little trash can button for now so that you can basically wipe your changes. But again, before the final release, I am going to try to have this whole flow, better worked out to where these get updated proper and you can see those changes when you change the different materials, because obviously we don't want it to lose its connections. So I did also add the ability to wipe data, so you can go in here. So for example, let's go in, and I think all of them should actually be, it's just where I have the search term, it's not getting the updated search proper when I'm hitting that. So based on that, I don't think it's the rough. Let's clear this. It might be this occlusion. It's a gas mask. That don't look like it either. So is it the spec sheet? It can't be. It has to be something that's getting applied to this when you load into the engine. So potentially they have like a replacement for one of these. What you can do is you can actually now right click any of these and it will wipe the data out. So say for example, if we want to clear the diffuse map, you can now right click that and actually wipe that data out. And so when you save, it should save without that. Let me confirm. So many features developed over such a short time that it's one of those things where it worked really well and then I make a change and haven't tested that out again. And so still kind of going through and crawling through before that official release, but this should actually set null in the code. As you can see here. And then let me make sure. So the head cover detail didn't actually get wiped. Go in here and make sure that this isn't cover part 3. Looks like that's the problem. So I had an issue a while back where basically I rewrote the system to go in here and add this data, and it looks like what it's doing is it's making 2 helmets on this character. Like I said, small things that I'm trying to iron out before we actually get this out. And then for the gas mask, so it did set it to null. So let's see what that did for this. No, so it still kept it. But you can see there, what's interesting is I'm going to have to check that JSON because the final result did write correctly to where it is loading, and you can see that basically that red is getting loaded. Although I didn't set a red, it is showing up as red though. Let's see, photo mode. Yeah. So it is getting it got the spec sheet. The part that it didn't get, I guess, is the gradient that I set actually has a index. It's actually shifted to where what's being applied in my engine is not the same match. So like, for example, with this, if we wanted to better match that exact material, which this sucks, is that it really is like a material by material kind of basis, and so there's no way to actually go in here and potentially over time we can make those a little bit better, but it's really one of those things where it's like there's not enough hours in the day to actually go dial every single material in. But this is essentially what's happening. So there's an offset value that's getting applied here to where essentially it looks like the one that's inside of here. Just shift on here till we find the red. There we go. So I didn't see any white, so I think it's getting something more like, for this specific one, it's like a black and a red. So it's somewhere on this spectrum of sheet here. I was really hoping that this would be like a universal, once I figured out how to actually set up the tiling, that it would end up being like a universal thing. But so far, absolutely not. It seems that every single one has some material offset that they've added. So that will be a challenge as far as like basically identifying which gradients you want to use. Probably the biggest thing is that you don't necessarily have to use one of the gradients like I did. You could essentially, instead of doing it using this gradient system, you could essentially go in here and say, so if we go back to here and load this up, instead of using like a gradient, you could actually shift this to like the diffuse map and then say something like red. And so instead of using a gradient that you're not sure where it will land, you could just apply a flat and allow the applied index to provide the color offset, which in this case I think is probably what we would want. So if we wanted to go in here and say like gray, I think that'll actually not prove my point quite as much though, because, well, let's do something like this. So we can add some texture to it as well. So let's just do like a flat gray. And then for that gas mask, I am really curious. Let's actually shift from the gas mask to another. Well, actually, I am really wanting to know what is getting applied. So if it's not the diffuse map, then what we can do is I've solved for this inside the engine already, applying specific ones, and I think it was to the rough. It's not the normal. So obviously we can go in here and say something like gray, and if we wanted to go and apply just a flat gray, let's go to the spec and we'll do a black. So we'll make it, or actually let's say like white. See if we can go in here and just say like, get it really shiny. I don't think that's gonna actually, and I might be able to find one that's got some texture to it, like that. Kind of create something of its own. So we're using the same rough, so that will let us know. So we're using the occlusion, which maybe that's where they've got this, because I can't imagine why it would actually, unless they were originally trying to add some occlusion to the actual lenses. I'm not sure why that occlusion is there. So let's just go ahead and hit save again and load this up and see what we get. And I am going to wipe, let's wipe this one out. Not that that'll do anything. Hit save again. And while that's loading, let me review this again, because I'm trying to remove all of those edge cases where essentially I've created a smart slot system that it's trying to use a very intelligent 4-stage fallback system to assign the slots. And I noticed the other day that essentially sometimes it doesn't get the assigned loop catch correctly. It just basically continues to try to assign it until it finds a slot that's available. And so in this case, it actually looked like it was getting applied to a bunch of different slots. And so if that is the case, then as long as that helmet's getting the same modifications to both though. So this one, it's now using gray. It's using the camo for the index and the gradient. It did set that material to null, so I just missed it earlier. So there's the gas mask with kind of a new like worn spec. You could actually probably do some like dirt or something on there to actually make like a really old looking gas mask. It'll look pretty sick. For that helmet, I guess the curious part is that I changed this to gray. So there must be something still getting applied. Let me make sure that this, okay, and it's no longer getting applied multiple times either, so that's a fun one where it really might have just been an edge case. But so it could have been where I applied the index, because as I mentioned, I haven't actually done that before, so let's try this. So let's go to the armor helmet again, and let's actually reset this. So we'll just hit, oh, okay. And so that actually should have wiped everything out. And then let's remove the gradient. She'd already had one that I was applying to the material, not to the actual game. And then under the diffuse, let's set this to camo. And we'll actually, let's go back, we'll say diffuse. And we'll change this over to the spec sheet. Or actually, I think it was index. So let's say diffuse, index, camo. Let's apply this one again. No gradient this time. And with the spec, let's actually grab the spec sheet and let's change the spec. You can see there it actually changed the shine on that one piece, but let's actually go in here and give it, see if there is a like a pattern one. kind of do like a rough pattern or something to it and just see how that loads in. For the gas mask, let's try to change this from being, it looked like this spec sheet metal was too bright. So if we look here and say DL, HR, so that one was, that's what caused the very light gray to get applied. Let's go in here and say something like this black one. So it's just like a flat black. And then maybe also try to apply a gradient to it and just see what we get here. Gray. Do something like this so it has kind of some changes to the details. And then we'll hit save again. And I'm really curious why the pants, that was twice that the pants were not loading in correctly when I hit launch that last time. But let's see what we get here. The hope is that once the online store hits, not only do I want to share like full custom characters, but I also want to store all of their variations when they're uploaded, so that the idea is that if you download a unique character, it will also grab the is it like a wood? It's like a wood texture. It'll also grab every variant that was created for that character and then update your sliders. So the hope is that without creating too much, too many options, because that is the challenge with the Infinity Designer concept, is that with creating new materials, you really can just create whatever the hell you want to come up with for any faction. The only thing I haven't been able to do yet is actually shift. I was hoping that they had some code in there for like moving the location of decals and stuff like that. I've seen some code that leads me to believe that some of it may be in there, but I haven't exactly found it just yet. But you can see here now we actually have a dark gas mask, and you can see it's got some weird texture to it. Let's hit the photo mode here. And so we still haven't figured out what's applying only in the engine. Something's applying that stripe, which I have removed in the actual thing. But I guess what's so curious is that a red is getting applied when shifting to that camo texture. So I wonder if by default, when you load that texture in their engine, if a red is getting applied to that specific, because I think for that one it is supposed to be like red pants. So let's go back out. Let's remove the, let's go back to our variations here, and then let's go back to our helmet. Let's remove the decal up top and get rid of that. And then for that pattern, that didn't work out really at all. Let's remove the current one and maybe do like a darker grunge one that we find here. It's a pouch. And to help with that, I've also got it to where you can set the lighting. So the lighting does help with the reflections to kind of see what you're loading up here. I haven't tried doing like a gold color, but technically if you hit something like one of these dark grays, that one's got a bunch of texture to it. Let's try something like that, just see. I think the challenge with this is going to be that the UV is going to be offset. So whatever you're applying, as long as it's a tiling texture and it doesn't have too much character in that one specific corner, I think you should be fine. It needs to kind of spread across the entire thing. Okay. That's a hair gradient. You could even add, you could add like a black cat to it if you wanted. Probably my favorite thing so far is that you can set emissives in this as well. So if you want to add like a material to your object that has an emissive property in the game, I'm still trying to figure out a clever way to make it to where you can shift the category of material. And kind of categorize. The only way I can do it is essentially by finding every material that has a emissive, and that takes a minute. But then essentially I could create like a category up top above these to where for each one of these, maybe underneath it or above it, you could say like what type of material do you want it to be, like a standard diffuse skin, clothing, or if you actually wanted it to have an emissive property. From what I'm seeing, you won't actually be able to set an emissive on this unless you select a material that's in the game that has that emissive property already, and then you can set the emissive slot. So always kind of comes down to like, so this one also has an includer. I noticed when I just pressed that, it also cleared. Let's remove the occluder and see what happens. And then I want to keep this dark. I actually like that. And then for the camo here, let's, now that we know, well, we don't know for sure, but I think the one that I applied is actually red. Let's go in here and apply something like this and just kind of see what we get. And then we'll go ahead and start on another piece. So for this guy I applied earlier, the PK armor, I know that some people have mentioned the army outfit. So let's actually shift over, and I need to switch to player, which if I do this would make it to where only the player would actually be set up. So you can set the category to all, and that will help with this. So let's go in here and say all, and for whatever reason it didn't get my preset. Let's see. It looks like it applied that change. Let me double check here. Because what I've been trying to do is ensure that essentially none of these things save onto the materials that are in the game, which some of that could explain. I thought I had this problem fixed, but it seems like I'm still getting every now and then where it's actually applying these down to the materials that are in the project. Materials are tricky using Unity, setting up instances of a material versus actually modifying the actual shared materials that are in the actual project. For this, I'm trying to make sure that all changes that are done stay topical and are not actually applied down. So let's actually shift back really quick. Let's clear this, and let's go with another scenario. So let me show you guys kind of the approach for creating a new character. So you can either go and select a preset. So if you have a specific character that you want to reference, you can do that. You can also go in here, and I've added the reroll function so that you can go in here and essentially just roll a new character. You can actually change the different, so you probably wouldn't do like child. It is getting bound to the actual skeleton, and I'm probably going to remove this thing where when I'm changing the category, it's actually changing the camera system to where it's going back to all, or it's changing it to where there's no filter. I'll probably remove that as well so that it's only shifting the camera, or it's not shifting the camera rather, so we don't end up with that camera getting moved back. But kind of the hope here is that once you find a character that you like, if you're scrolling through and you find a face that you like and you want to play as, you also have variations that you can go select from that use the game code, or it's ones that you've created to apply different variations to this player or to this head mesh. So say this is our guy, we want to make a soldier. We're going to actually lock the head here, and then we can sit here and re-roll the different ones. Now I am curious why this one head is not getting changed. That one right there, because it's only got one in that category. But let's go back up here. So we'll lock that one. And those change. I've written in the code to where you can now also self-heal your application as well. So if any update comes out, you can actually update all of the data that's being used for the game as well. And we're actually going to leave facial hair off because we'll try to make like a soldier, and we probably don't want some of the clipping. So even with the hair, we'll just kind of see what we can get away with. But if we wanted to, for example, if we wanted to give this guy a hairline instead, like if we actually wanted to give him like a buzz cut, give him kind of military do, this is where we can go in here and select this, go in here to our mask, and we'll go in here and say hair. And you can actually apply these different hairlines to them so that they end up with less of the bald look. You can actually make them look a little bit more military oriented here. So let's give him I like how he's got the cut, but he's also got a receding hairline there. There we go. Change the lighting here, something a little less intense. And we'll go ahead and save this as a variant. So that way I can come back to it if I need it. And this is where the keyboard entry actually came into it. Someone requested that before, and I actually appreciated that feedback because there are a lot of options here. So actually going and being able to scroll through here does become more difficult with time. So say we want to make this as a military character, we'll go and get him a helmet, as we were working on earlier. We can apply that variation, so that's why having that variation saved definitely helps. And then I'm going to go in here and also set a new gradient. So let's actually go in here and set this to a black and just see what happens when we do that. And we'll also increase the spec on here. We'll make it something much darker and maybe more flat so that when we apply the camo, it should come out a much darker look here. So then let's go over here to hat, and we'll give him kind of like a give him something in there maybe that doesn't clip. See if I can find one. I actually was really enjoying the idea of like, so it's the so it's actually the female hats that kind of are lower on the skull there. So if you want to go in there and add something up underneath the hat to make it look like he's got some hair or he's got something under there, you can actually utilize some of the female hats like this. So if you actually wanted to make it look like it was cold, so if you wanted to design characters that were like cold weather characters, you could do that as well. So for this one, let's go in here and we'll actually also make this, let's do this like maybe like a brown, and then do something like that. And then for the mask, we could actually find, so if we wanted to make this guy have a balaclava, which you can see here, the one that's kind of default in the game is this like worn thread look. You can actually go in here now and update this to where we could do something like cloth or fabric. So that it still gets the maybe fabric. Cotton might also work. And I know some of these are, ooh, I kind of like that. Actually, I actually really like that. I'm going to stick with that for a second. And then you can see that there's like a clipping challenge with this guy's head. So especially adding the details like going in there and changing it to where he had the buzz cut. You know, that's not really necessary if we are kind of covering this guy's entire face. So we found a mesh that doesn't really clip. He's got like this little bit of a clip here on the nose. So let me see if I can go a little bit more, and we'll find one that kind of perfectly hides under these details here. And when you're setting these different things, if you have the variation menu open, it's like updating all of the data inside the variation menu. So the application will load a little bit slower because it's setting a lot of materials and updating textures. So if you toggle that off while you're scrolling through, it actually will go a lot faster. So then once you actually have this set up, if you want to use like a variation on this guy, we could go make this guy look closer to what we were hoping without the actual mesh. So if we don't want that mesh actually jutting through the material, you can do something like that. And then let's give him an additional accessory here. So let's give him kind of like a mouth guard here. If we can find one that I think actually most of them will be under cape. So we kind of give him some cold weather. If we could get the clipping not to be an issue, I would be happy to add something like that. And that one's actually got some additional materials up top there. Maybe go like full Christmas pattern here. So with this, let's go in here to the scarf, and we'll make it a scarf like no other scarf in the game. Give it kind of a unique feel here. And then we'll also update the gradient. Okay. Looking good so far. And then let's go here and do our torso. So we want to make this guy look military, but we also want to try to make him look bundled up. So I think probably give him something like this type of vest, and then we'll put some layers over that. So next you would probably go to like sleeves and find the matching sleeves for this one. So I've tried to leave this as open as possible. So, I could have restricted a lot of things here to make this a little bit more user friendly, but at the same time, I didn't want to actually remove too many of the options for you guys to go in here and create whatever the hell you want to create. So let's try to get this guy a little bit more military style. So maybe do like a gray, do like a modern military first. Maybe even do something like that. And then let's grab the sleeves, do something similar like that. And then let's throw something over top of this to make it a little bit more warm weather or cold weather. do like the leathers, but that makes them a little bit too. You could even have like a fallen PK, like a dead PK uniform, kind of like that. You can get rid of the decals as well. So say, for example, why don't we give him his own cold weather gear here. So he's got his own form of jacket, and we will actually go here to this, and let's see if we can find a material, or maybe even just a gradient that we like for this. Give him kind of a dirt look. I like something like that to start. We can kind of, I don't like how the scarf is clipping. There's a lot of clipping going on with the scarf, so maybe I'll, let's go back to the scarf really quick and see if we can find one that's a little bit more suited for this jacket. There's chainmail. There we go. Well, I think maybe that was the one he had on. I think it was that one, actually. Maybe I can find some armor that will actually block out some more of that clipping. So let's just kind of push forward and leave that as it is for a second. So let's go in here and change the, we say pattern. And then we'll change the gradient. That. And then let's keep pushing forward to where we can try to find some armor here that maybe will help with some of that. So he's kind of a ragtag military guy right now. Let me see what we got as far as like military gear for him. So we could even throw like we could throw this additional helmet thing on him, the helmet clasp. Could give him kind of that look, which I kind of like. It would help explain the cold weather look. Let's get rid of the mesh on there. And then let's see if there is a darker one. So there we go. And then let's see, armor torso. Let's go in here and give him some military gear. Something maybe like that, which helps with that clipping. Doesn't exactly completely cover it up, but could do something like that actually. Continue to go through the list here, see what we got. Yeah, so with that heavier coat, really there's only a few armors that I think fit proper, and I think it's that one. And then let's go in here and see if there's a good accessory that kind of helps bulk up some of this. Could actually do something like that. And that starts to actually look like a lot more layered approach. Let's change the color on this armor really quick. So instead of, it does use a gradient, so we could probably just go in here and do like a, yeah, like a darker one. We'll leave the spec, and then, yeah, we'll leave the spec as it is. Just see how this turns out. And then we'll give him some normal looking military gear. By that I mean we don't want it to be too road. Looks like the signal was just lost there for a second. Sorry, guys. That cut out. Let's give them this plating. Then for the lower ones, we'll do kind of the, I think probably the metal one here. Get rid of the, and we'll only do it on one side, so he's got a little bit of a unique shift there. For the hands, we're going to want to, let's go ahead and do a backup of this guy. Save. For the hands, make sure all this is, yeah. The hands, make sure it's on man, because basically, again, so the player needs 2 arms to be able to support the armor system. For this one, it actually only, for the different NPC characters, you only need to do the hands. So if this is an NPC character, of course we can use it on the player to just kind of dial in the character, but then if we ever wanted to actually make this a player, you would go and actually update some of the hand stuff, or what you'll end up with is that you'll like apply a pair of gloves and the hands will completely disappear. I've tried to do some of the code to where it knows if you're doing a player or an NPC, so that it won't do that, but it's not, it's still ongoing. It's not completely foolproof for sure. So let's give this guy some gloves as well, which I guess in that case we don't actually need hands. We're going to do some gloves. And we'll give him some actual, like, some thick cold weather gloves. And none of these weird colors. We'll change the colors to just be like standard military gray here. So then let's shift down to the legs. And we'll try to find the closest thing to like military issue. Could do the cold weather similar to the top here. Helps blend it in a little bit better. And the legs, for the most part, so I've been trying to hook up all of the materials as best as possible to kind of explain from the last time I did a stream. Basically, all of this is being done programmatically, so I'm not manually creating textures or materials. And some of the naming is not correct. I'm not sure how they go in there and they're actually updating all this stuff to apply the specific names, but it's pretty wonky. And so because of that, not everything has a material yet, just because a lot of them require hand placed materials with texture names and everything that don't actually line up. And so it's one of those like, how much time you got kind of things. But over time, we'll get more of those added so that it looks a little bit better. And then for the legs, we can actually go give him like some military holsters or something. Give him something on his legs here. Probably accessories. There's a lot of accessories. I think that was the, yeah, so they did this like little floating holster, and then they did some like leather holsters. Like, that's like a workman holster kind of thing. I think I do want to actually try to give him this holster, as I foresee him having like a gun. So I probably actually want to change these pants to support that a little bit better so it's not clipping. So that, for example, those pair of pants have the actual strap visible. And so we could actually go in here to these. Let me see if it has a variation. It has a dead zombie legs variation. Let's see, actually let's keep going and see if there's one that's has some boots, or at least has some boots that we can add. So for each one of these, this is actually something I ran into a while back when I was doing the custom armors. So several of these actually have the shoes set up on a material, so you can actually turn them on and off. You can use that however you like to actually add or remove different boots to different pairs of pants. So if you find a pair of pants that you like but you want a different pair of boots, you can always check over there in the custom material section to see if it supports removing the boots or not in that second slot. Man, that's a shame. There's really just not as many as I was hoping that would support that holster. So let's go here. Let's remove the, so one pair has like cuts in it and the other ones don't. So one's Dylan damaged and one's not. So, and then what we'll do is we'll actually go in here. So this is one of the ones that I haven't set with a custom shader. So for that, certain ones in here, until I get them all added to the custom shaders, you won't be able to apply specific changes. But I'm planning on working on that before I actually release this next version, so it's easier to change those. Otherwise, you end up with, and you know, I really hate these shoes on this pair of pants, so I might just go with something like that over, even if it is clipping a little weird. And this one's got like different bags on it. So if you turn this off, what does it get rid of? You can see there it toggled off some random bags here on the side. A little bit too fancy for a patrol guard, but we could probably do something like that. At least the military boots, the boots look a little bit more natural there. And this is an example, so you can go in here and set these to null, and then you have this add-on, which is some shoelaces. You can set that to null and actually go down here to the shoes section, and there are a few different pairs of boots. I haven't added all the different ones, which essentially, if you wanted to add the different ones, they would be different pairs of pants with the pants turned off and the shoes left on. So it's like, it's this extra work you have to put into it, but you can technically go in there and create new pairs of pants and shoes and boots. It just takes some work to set it all up. Again, back to like the how much time you got. So maybe we'll throw like some knee pads on there or something. Make it look a little bit more. Well, actually, instead of doing that, let's go to leg armor, and we can actually go in here and we'll add some actual armor that will help with some of this. So there's the armor legs slot, which has more of the like multiple, you can assign it to multiple parts. And then I've tried to add the very specific parts. So let's see, get rid of the PK. And then, what is that? That's the lower part. So you could actually just add the knee pad. This is where I like this whole like toggling the null thing. It's a lot of fun. So if you want to go in here and add something like this, looks pretty good, but let's change the color and make this look a little bit more new by doing that. And then with a spec sheet, we'll go in here and add like a different spec sheet. It's like a new piece of armor. And we'll do like that. Okay, so here's our new military guy. So let's go ahead and hit save. Make sure that have everything how we want it, and let's load in and see what we got. And for some of the early testing, you should be able to see Aiden's back immediately when you load in. I've thought about trying to create my own custom menu here. Oof. So what is causing that? I've never actually seen that before. Let's hit continue and just see. So that's got to be where the skeleton can't do one of the pieces, probably the big bulky chest armor. So like, for example, it wouldn't work as a player necessarily, but you could make it an NPC. You just would need to set the right skeleton. It's kind of funny. Yeah, it's definitely where it's not binding fully. So like, boots are turned off for whatever reason, and the bindings are not updating. It could be even things like the scarf. You never know with this, where who knows what very specific detail caused it to freak out. It could be that one armor piece on the legs, but for the most part, I do hate that we'll have to go check out why this mask didn't show up how I wanted it to. It looks like the scarf showed up just fine. But I don't think I applied anything that should be too unique as far as this goes. Let's go see here. So we'll get rid of the gradient in case the gradient was the thing that caused an issue. And then with this patterned fabric, maybe it was just this very, well, let's just remove the gradient and when I hit save here, let's check our file. So there was a gradient applied to that material. I couldn't remember if that was something I set or if it was already on there. We'll remove the gradient and we'll see if that diffuse texture shows up now. For the armor, or the reason that it's not properly working as a player, this is where I've created the ability to press F12 to create a bug report, where essentially what it'll do is it will go and create an output for a crash report that can then be used to kind of figure out what about this very specific loadout may have caused the player to not bind correctly. And some of these things will just have to get like flagged, so that the hope is that if I can figure out a way to identify the ones that are causing the issue, the hope is that I can go in there and actually say like a pop-up warning, so that when you hit save and you've selected player, it lets you know that there's a very specific armor piece like this PK loose. And what I've started to do, let's actually see. I've written the actual data. I haven't implemented it yet. But essentially there's this new folder called skeleton data that in there I've essentially written, I've used a compare script to actually go in there and determine what specific meshes are bound to different skeletons. So say, for example, for this PK one, this is bandit heavy. If we go in here to PK heavy, let's say open. If we crawl through this, I mean, the code will do this automatically in the future, but essentially the idea here is that it may help us identify which ones you try to apply and which ones are going to cause you an issue, so you don't have to load up. But I mean, kind of the go-to principle is here is that if you're going to use the system to design new characters that are not in the game, that have never been created before, you just have to be aware that while the engine is very powerful to be able to instantiate all these prefabs, I've gotten as close as possible. Maybe I can go further in the future, but I've tried to get as close as possible to compare what you would see in the game with what you see here, so that you can determine if it will be successful or not. It's one of those things where the only way you would actually know in the end is by launching and testing. So let's hit save again, and let's see a couple of things. Let's see if that, and actually while I'm here, go to this accessory. I want to actually apply a darker gradient to this to these goggles up top, along with a darker spec, and see if that helps, because we'll hit save variation there as well, and then we'll hit save for the character. And let's see if that actually fixes the binding to the player. If we were trying to make this as an NPC character, all we have to do is say like, all we have to do is go in here and say like military, militia actually, militia man 01, and then we'll change the category to man, and we'll change the class to peacekeeper because he primarily has peacekeeper gear on. And then we could actually add back this armor loose fitting, and I think this one should now bind to this guy without issue. Now I did notice that my helmet just went away for some reason. Okay, so let's hit save. Oh, and it can't save into the game right now. So you'll get like a pop-up to let you know like your game's running, so you can't actually, because it's trying to inject it directly into the game. But it should still, I got to double check to make sure it's binding properly. So it wasn't that specific piece. Most of the time I think it's the armor. So if we go in here, we'll crash the game out real quick. Let's make sure we have a good backup of this guy. Still being used. Tilt the camera a little bit here. There we go. So we didn't get a warning that time. And you can see here that we now have our militiaman. For our player, let's go figure out why the player, so if we hit reroll here, it'll change it back to our player. Class is all. And probably the best thing to immediately do is drop the other pieces of armor on the torso and legs and arms, because the player, as most of you guys who are aware who played the game, the player is not really meant to wear armor in this game. They just they're meant to parkour. So because of that, you don't end up with many things bound to the actual skeleton's legs. And so my guess is, because I haven't really run into this before, is that it's a specific piece of armor causing that issue. So let's go in here and hit save. And what we can do to test is I'll show you guys how you can basically test our NPC by doing a replace on. We can actually do a very quick test, to be honest, if we just overwrite Abdul. So if we say NPC Abdul, And let's change this to man and back to Peacekeeper. And let's at least give him the torso armor back, because I don't think it's that torso armor. I do think it has something to do with those legs. But like, for example, this piece right here will never go on a player for whatever reason with the skeleton. It just will not bind to the actual player. So let's go here and save. And that's going to write directly into our Dying Light 2 folder. Go to source. So that's saving all of this directly into the game. And I notice I've got a couple of different ones in here. Let me clear out some of my other tests. Make sure that doesn't, it wouldn't cause any issues, but. And hopefully in the future it'll be easy to actually go and say like clean specific ones out of the custom data file, but for now it's a little ways down the road. I wonder if it's the goggles. It's something binding to the, I think it's something applying to the top here. So I wonder if it's this, these freaking goggles. I should have just run over there to see if it was working on Hackon, but let's get rid of that. And then let's also get rid of the scarf, just in case it's something like the scarf causing that. The balaclava definitely works. Oh, that's updating for Hackon. I actually want to see armor. I actually want to add that back for Hackon to just make sure that that is working as expected. So we'll hit save. And then for the player, we'll go in here and say armor. Let's remove the torso. We removed that, and let's remove the helmet accessory, because this is pretty simple. So if this causes it, I'm going to be super shocked. Hit save. Never say never. There we go. Okay, so I do think it was either the scarf or the goggles causing that issue. So specifically the Renegade, it's like Renegade female goggles for the top there. I bet those were the culprit, because those aren't actually applied to anyone in the game. And so I bet that actually caused it. So I need to flag those ones. But we'll, I'll do testing to actually confirm that it was those. So the boots didn't show up for some reason, and then some of the changes to the actual gloves and everything, it looks like they are getting set by something in here, and then that fabric material just refuses to show up. Let's go jump up here and see. There we go. So you can see here on our player on Hackon, who's now changed into this military guy, that loaded just fine. I can't remember. I don't think I threw the scarf back on him. And then it's curious that the boots don't show up, because let me see. Let me make sure that material didn't accidentally get set to null. PK legs. Pants, PK pant. It's slot 9. Slot 9. No slot 9? Should be slot 9. Torso, sleeves, legs. Huh. So these specific legs are getting bound to 0, 2, which could be a problem, but Also, it's where my material changes to the boots. When I toggled the boots off, it's where they're actually getting cut off in the code, which leads me to where I'm going to try to create kind of an easy guide so that players can understand like what has been applied to these. Because obviously, it's one thing when you see it in the engine versus when you get into the game. For these, what's interesting is that I think with some of these, and I still have to do some testing. Some of these they've set up the decal layers, and based on what I've seen with the naming conventions, my guess would be is that they're not super uniform. But I think the idea here is that some of these are set to diffuse 1 versus 0. And so let me show you what that actually looks like. This is my shadow. Oh, because it's using the first person shadow. So the first person is not affected by this currently. So the helmet did actually get the darker color there. And then the boots are toggled off. Let's try to set some of these. I hate how those sleeves are like skin tight. Not really sure I want them skin tight. Hey, Best Gamer Ali, if you're still on the line. Sorry I missed some of your guys' chats. I've been engrossed. Let me move the chat up here a little bit. Thanks for joining, guys. Is the helmet camo custom or is it present? Echo, if you're still on the line, everything that you see inside the engine is custom, is retail. So everything being shown here is part of the retail engine. The challenge is getting all of the retail stuff to actually work with all the different skeletons and all the different possible combinations of things. But for example, with these textures, if each material that they're getting applied to, which I've thought in the future, one approach to this is that you could actually have a designated material that is your like builder material, that when you press it, it is like a name of a material in the game, but all of its slots are essentially null, and it's up to you to just assign materials. I think the biggest concern I have with that is I think it would absolutely work. I think the biggest challenge with that is going to be optimization. So their code is currently applying all these things that I'm setting. But if you made something like zombies have the same, like you built zombies, custom zombies, and scattered them all over the world, and every single material had modifications and was getting altered at runtime, my guess is that you would start to see some serious overhead from all the models. And so it's one of those, like, I don't know how much optimization is being done by using materials that are already in the game versus using these modifiers. And I think we're going to find out real soon now that the engine is almost ready to release public. I guess we're going to about to find out. I know with I Am Legion, I'm going to use it to do the 1.6 update, which is going to be pretty exciting, really fun. I'm excited to get some detail into my new models. But for this example, I guess what I'm mentioning, so I haven't written the code to where it doubles up, because you want to leave at least one slot available for the decals. So say, for example, you want to add blood splatter to your clothing, and the mask system. Masks and everything can't be applied to every single material. So they have something in there that is actually designating how they get applied. So let's fix something really quick. So first, let's go fix the legs so our boots show up proper. And then for our sleeves, I already wrote everything. So like for the pants, we'll use this as an example. We do have some other ones, but obviously these are way brighter than anything I would want on the military guy. For this, I guess what's actually surprising here, let me make sure this is cleared out. Yeah. I think I just needed to hit this trash can from where I was messing around earlier. Okay, this looks a lot better. If we apply a gradient only, that should do most of it, is just applying the gradient. We'll save a variation as well, so that if we want to come back to these darker pants, we can at any time. Though, see there where that's not getting, something about my recent work has made that not reapply, so I'll have to fix that before release. But it does get saved when you're doing the, and actually, let me check here. I think it's just not getting reapplied to the mesh. If we go here, it is getting applied to the variation. So so at least it's getting applied to the variation. So it's something that it has to do with how I'm applying it down to the model. And then let me actually catch up with some of the comments here. Coda, thanks for joining. Echo, thanks for joining. Ghost, thanks for joining. Borderlands, great to see you on here. For morphs, as far as making a 3-foot tall, 900-pound person, you can actually make an obese person. That's a thing. As far as making them 3 feet tall, technically you could do a child skeleton, and yeah, technically you could make some terrible morph creature. It wouldn't look quite right, but yeah, you could probably do it. Can we change other models to SpongeBob models? I'm sure with the coming updates, you can currently do that if you do a mesh replacement. I'm sure you could actually add SpongeBob to the game, but not really something this engine's meant to do. Coda asked, make possible for immunity hits 0 Fury mode. Completely unrelated, but I appreciate you asking. Absolutely not really something that I've added to the mod config yet. But for a lot of those like skills and a lot of those things, I do have a upcoming mod kit that is going to be different. So I'm redoing the way that I Am Legion is actually being introduced into the game. And with those changes, things like the mod config, which I was using much earlier on, I'm actually going to write a lot of code so that it's able to control a lot more and do a lot more inside the engine. That will allow it to auto heal, so I never have to update the code again. And then it will also allow you to edit specific things inside the code. So that's coming down the road. For now, I've been focusing on the Infinity Designer, trying to get this out to the public, but I'll return to that once I have a chance to get this 1.6 update out. So back to what we were discussing here. So basically, when you're saving, the data is getting saved onto the output. Let me make sure it's getting saved onto Aiden. It is. So it's getting saved onto the output, and you basically have the ability to set a 0 or a 1 layer, and you kind of have to decide which one is the one responsible for actually holding the diffuse. There's no way without me getting the material properties from every single material that I'll know which one is actually holding the original value. And so even if you remove the diffuse, which is probably why the gas mask continued to have the lines, is that a 1 layer is setting the lines on the gas mask. I figured that out on all the ones that I've added to the game on the gas mask, but I haven't written that into the engine to be able to decide how to do that. And so what I might try to do in the future is essentially allow you to adjust a 0 or a 1 layer. And that actually could be pretty easy, so that it would be able to easily go in there and set whether it's a 0 or 1. So the fastest way to show this would be essentially we're going to go into the zip here, or the pack file. We'll pull the skeleton out. So let's go back to our human, go back to like this folder where I've already added him previously. Just extract him, and then we'll essentially just manually edit this skeleton, which I think this one's already pointed to. Yep. Loading a million files here. Okay. And so essentially for the different layers, especially like the gloves, those gloves should have been a pretty straightforward one, but it didn't apply. The fastest way to see if it would work or not is probably to change this gradient to like a 1 I think the legs didn't get it last time, but we'll kind of start slow. I know the torso didn't. It was like its own color. That being said, I did apply gradients. And for those of you that were on the channel earlier, one of the challenge could be is that I'm applying gradients down to these things versus applying flat colors. So say for torso, if we go back to our torso here, and load this back up, I have a gradient getting applied, which is a gray gradient, which you would assume that would work. However, in this case, to actually make sure that it does work, let's switch to a diffuse, and let's say something like gray, and we'll grab like a dark gray, and we'll just apply a flat diffuse to that gradient slot. And actually, maybe it would help to clear the index as well, because the index is going to try to shift that. So let's see what that does. We'll apply that. We'll go to torso 2, and we'll change this to diffuse and gray. Oh, this is the wrong one, but also I need an undo button. Let's see. Let's go back to our gradients. And I didn't really see much change with this one either, to be honest. Let's do something like, it's kind of bawdy. Let's do something like this and just see what happens. So it's going to actually be the sleeves. Go into the sleeves, open this up. For the gradient, we're going to wipe the index, and then for the gradient, we'll set diffuse gray, and we'll set this to dark as well. And then for the gloves, let's maybe do the same and just see what we get here. So let's go to the gloves. We'll wipe the index and we'll set the gradient. Set the gradient to a diffuse, and this one we'll say like black. So we'll do like black gloves. And let's just see what we get here. So let's hit save. Whoops. Desktop. Save. And then let's hit save. And then we'll also, let's do some more experiments with Pacon here. Let's say MCPC Abdul. And we will add back, let's continue to add some additional armors here while we're testing and just see what works. So for example, if we want to go back and add a bunch of these different ones that we added, so I thought that one, there we go. Let's say I thought I had a knee pad. Let's get rid of the decal and then add something like that. And then for the upper body torso, let's add, let's actually go with this armor this time and get rid of the PK, and let's remove the index and do the same thing. So let's actually go and remove that first, and then let's do diff gray. Let's give him like some military flat, maybe even like, for this one we'll do like a sort of dark blue. I guess that's really what it was already, but that's kind of good. It's got some details in it. And then for the armor accessory, we'll bring that back, and then we'll also go in here and say, let's add back some of these and just see if it plays nice. It should play, most of these should always play nice with the NPCs. It's only the player models that need most of the consideration. Null. Okay, so then we'll save him, save. And then I've got my audio turned off for this. Here we go. There we go. Now I can actually hear it. And then let's go ahead and hit launch. And then for the balaclava, I should have set that to the other layer. So those gloves still look like they're holding on to their diffuse, which, yeah, for that one we remove the index and we set the gradient. Technically for things like gloves and anything with fabric, most of that's being done by the normal map and the rough map. And so for most of those, if they've added some diffuse map that adds like a ton of color or something like that, you could probably just drop the, yeah, so you could probably just drop the material or the diffuse off of there. The boots are back, but you know, a lot of changes for this guy. It's hard to tell if those pants actually got any darker. Let's go check out Hack On real quick. Looks good. All the armor is bound, so everything's on there. The only thing we didn't add was the scarf. And I am hoping in the future, I'm hoping to make variations of everything to where it's like you have like a cold weather version versus a warm weather version, so that when you play the game and have the winter weather module activated, you end up with guys that look like they're actually trying to stay warm. So you can see here that even the shirt underneath maintained its original brown color. And so for these, the index is not working, which this could be a wrong assumption that those are set up proper, like those are set up. Those were found in the files, but it could be one of those things where the variant materials are actually applying the actual index. Maybe the default one, this banded torso, they do have one on here, banded torso. That's for a different one. Maybe this, you know, default one has that brown texture, and there's, you know, there's just really not much. Let me clear this really quick. Okay, so it did find it in the files, but I'm assuming maybe that doesn't work. So what I can do is essentially let's just clear the different ones, and then you can see that the diffuse map is actually empty. So we could actually go in here and just set a diffuse on here. So we could do like a black diffuse, and the normal map and the rough map and the spec map should carry the fabric into the game. So we'll see if that works. Let's go to the sleeves and do that as well. Let's kill the gradient, go to the diffuse, and we'll set this to black. And then same with the gloves. Let's see if these gloves can be fixed. I hate that color that's getting applied to them. So let's kill the gradient, and here we'll go ahead and say add some detail here so we don't end up everything looking just flat black. And then everything else looked pretty good. Let's go in there and do like another example. So like with the armor, I was doing this previously, but then we ran into that issue with the twist on the skeleton. For this balaclava, I'm going to try to fix that by changing the index. And then for this upper right, let's go in here and say like, what does this disable? Oh, okay. So if you just wanted like pads without these reinforcement plates, you could actually, so let's try that. So let's remove that, and then let's make this kind of, let's remove the index and the gradient and just do like a flat black. Or actually, let's do like a gray. Promise I'll stop doing all the flat black here in a little bit. I'm just trying to kind of see what I can actually get set up with this camo. I was messing around with these for a good while when I was doing my testing, and I do know that you can get some pretty nice camo patterns and everything applied to this, which I'm trying to remember, did this load into the game proper? I thought I saw this, but let me go in and say, let's remove the gradient and set a, I don't know how much of that is being done by the, so a lot of the detail is being done by the diffuse. So what can we get away with if we do camo? I mean, maybe you just kind of pass it off as like spray paint kind of thing. Not always a huge fan of that, but we say here, we'll go to spec. It's not spec, I keep doing that. It's the, actually, is there a camo mask? No. So it's going to be the index camo. Yeah. Let's do like that and see if that shows up. And then as another example to just see how it goes, let's grab this armor over here on his lower arm. And let's change that guy to where he has a really like metal look. Because I think most of that's metal, but he's got the straps. Sadly, that's not a separate one. So what I can do there is, instead of changing the diffuse, I could actually try to change the spec on it and see if we can get like a much darker spec sheet to make that look a little bit different. Maybe not something so drastic like that, but let's see what that does. So then we'll save this as hack on, and then for hack on, we'll go and fix. Let me try the thing again for the balaclava, because that one, the only thing that makes sense is if the balaclava model itself doesn't actually accept a diffuse on that index. So let's see, open a dual and say balaclava, and we'll set this to diffuse 1 and see how that goes. And then for our player, because we know our player is going to have, oh, I didn't pass it back in. Let's add it back in. And then for our player, he may be able to take all, he may be able to actually support everything here. So let's just find out. Wipe the name, update the file, and then for the player, actually with the balaclava, let's go in here and try something else. So what happens if we add an index and then we add a gradient of like brown? Because right now it's like a gray. And so let me see what happens, and then we'll change the pattern of the fabric just so it's a little bit easier to see. What if we do something like that and hit save? Okay, let's hit launch. Let's see what we got. But the hope here is that we're going to have some really good gunners, some actual good militia, some actually good military people in the game here soon. Even the PK I would like to try to update. Hey, you mid. No, I'm not. I've got my Patreon supporters. Huge shout out to the Patreon supporters for the contributions they give. But no, I don't get paid for this. I get paid through exciting projects. So I think it really was the scarf actually that was causing, but you can see here, so the camo that I tried to apply really is red. And so that one that I'm trying to load in, so potentially if you're going to load that one, it might, you could possibly use like an index and actually update that. I did notice that that showed up, which I thought I set that to null. So if we say upper left, maybe some of my null calls are not getting recorded for the materials. Let's go see with Hackon. Hey, Hacker Stalker. I have actually had a lot of interesting stuff with the Techland side for this. So it started out with, so setting that to 0 actually removed that material altogether. So what that makes me think is that fabric that I selected initially actually doesn't exist maybe in the engine anymore, which is strange because I pulled it out of the engine. But by switching that to 0, it's returned the original diffuse map to that texture of the balaclava. Meanwhile, on my guy, he actually got the changes on his balaclava. So my guess is that 0 is correct. Possibly the diffuse map I was trying to set just doesn't actually exist in the code anymore. So he's also got the camo. It's all looking pretty good, actually. So everything bound to the model, no issue. The darker materials are showing up. So setting the spec does seem to work to darken the armor. So if you're not trying to go and change everything to a specific one. Now I will note that I set the undercoat and the sleeves. They got a completely new diffuse and had their index and everything removed. So the fact that that is still like that gives me another use case where potentially the 0 and the 1, or actually maybe on that material you can't actually set a diffuse. So anyway, back to the Techland side. So the latest from Techland is I spoke to Timon again back in September because I reached back out about the bugs that the community have been experiencing and basically asked if I could get in contact with a programmer or someone on the team that could help me answer some of the technical questions, such as the save game corruption and some of the other more common things that players have been seeing. And he did point me towards Raphael. Sorry if I butchered his name. Who's in charge of basically bringing mods to the Mod.io platform. Completely unrelated. But his approach was like basically like he put me in contact. I sent a nice email saying like, hey, thanks for all your work kind of thing. Like, if you get a chance, these are the bugs I'm interested in finding out. Never heard anything back. Waited a couple of months, never heard anything. Actually waited to the new year, sent out a formal email on like January saying like, hey, like I'm still curious about these bugs, like any updates. And he got back to me, didn't read the email, completely bypassed everything I said in the email and sent back like, hey, I'm looking into other map projects. I'll review your mod at some point. And he said like next week and let you know. And then I never heard back from them. So that was all at the tail end of Timon reached out back in January of 2023 and, basically hyping my work and stuff like that. And they offered official support for the I Am Legion Reborn mod over many conversations. It was like in March 2023 that they offered, official support, to which I interviewed for a job at Techland. Basically got told like, yeah, we would love to have you here. You could come work on our team. Like you could pretty much, we think you'd be a good fit in all these different departments. Did a follow-up interview with Timon where he basically said like, no, this would be very difficult because you're not in Poland. It'd be difficult to do anything with you in the United States. So because of that, like, they also asked lots of things like, how old are you? And stuff like that, that it was kind of like, okay. And I think the kind of the point with that is that it's like, why are you still making mods? So I'm a indie game dev in my spare time. And I'm now doing it full time. So at that time, it was in my spare time. But I'm now doing so. I've actually just started with a company that I actually have become a part owner with. That's a game dev company. We're working on a game this year, and I have my own design studio where I do game dev, mainly in Unity. And so this whole thing has been just a passion project over the last 2 years, and basically they just kind of said like, we appreciate your work. There was like this one point where they were like, we're playing the hell out of your code. This is crazy. You're insane. Like, this is cool stuff. And then they came back and said like, you know, we want quality. Like we want quality for anything that we would release. So therefore, like, we should be doing some of these things. It's like, okay, well, that's great. I just want to work with your teams. So if you could just let me know if there's any opportunities for work or if I could work with you. I've probably mentioned like 7 times to Timon personally that, it is a passion project, but I'm also interested in working with their teams and continuing to develop for this type of game. I'd work in zombie games any day, all day. And so because of that, it's just gone nowhere. So after the Tencent merger, all of that just dried up. Timon completely. They released the EULA update that basically said that they own everything that you make if you use their tools, to which I then started writing my own tools. So as far as I see it from a legal standpoint, they can't shift and lift any of this work over to them. I hope they appreciate the Infinity Designer here in the future. I hope they appreciate what was done with I Am Legion. But at the same time, like, that collaboration has sadly just become kind of tainted at this point where you're sitting there going like, you got a big company that is just, acting super shady to a single dev, indie dev, who's putting a lot of hours into their work and trying to help fix the game or fix bugs for the community or whatever it might be. So it's been an up and down, but that's kind of the short and the long of it is that still haven't really heard anything. Honestly, I haven't heard anything professional from them in a minute. I've reached out multiple times to try to get feedback or to try to get support for the community. But even that has now gotten to the point where it's just not really anything said back. And so I think that's pretty much that. Hopefully, in the future, they'll strike up more conversations. But based on the Tencent model and what Tencent does, I hope I hope the whole thing goes well, and I hope the company does fine and they don't end up doing what a lot of other companies have done that have been acquired by Tencent. I hope they have a successful, continued years. I do actually really enjoy their games, and I appreciate what they're trying to do. And so I would hate to see them go under or them no longer be making these games. So hopefully that continues to move forward. And as always, I'm happy to work with development teams. So I'm design leadership and technical designer and programmer as an indie effort. And love to work on projects. So we'll see. Your turn, Umid. You have to share a story now. So with that applied, so I'm applying a more common texture to the mask to see if this diffuse texture actually shows up on there. I did apply this this gradient, which potentially made that work. So what I'll do is I'll actually just remove the gradient and remove the index, and let's just apply a standard diffuse texture, and let's just see if this loads in. For the shirt, let's go in here and say if we've got this black that's being applied to it, but it's not showing up, then we can assume which, by the way, that reminds me before I do that. Also for the torso armor, let's try to change the torso armor camo a little bit here by, instead of applying the diffuse camo, let's wipe that. Let's go to the index and apply the camo. And then under the gradient, let's then apply something obvious, not red because it's already doing red. So let's do something like throw a normal map on there. That'll be obvious. Let's do like the grass. Like obviously that will, well, the problem is that kind of messes up the whole camo pattern thing. Let's do something like that. Let's go with an old look for that and see if that loads in. And then what I'm going to do is, so we're going to save this. We're going to do all this with the player now that we know that the player is working, minus that scarf. It really did appear to be the scarf that messed that whole thing up, which is crazy. So we'll hit save. And then on the actual model here, let's extract that, load it up, and then on this one I'm removing it and I'm setting the texture, potentially because I'm removing the index. I haven't really played with it a lot, but I am curious if I essentially remove or instead of nulling the index, what if I set a diffuse texture to the actual index? Not a lot is known on my side as far as like how they're doing the materials. I don't think anybody really has too much information on how they're doing the material system. And so a lot of this is guesswork that's led up to this. Cancel, I gotta throw it back in. Keep forgetting to do that. Oh, and I forgot to do the that shoulder pad to make sure that that was set to null. It's looking good though. All right, so no update on the bandit thing here, but the good news is that texture showed up on the balaclava. So turns out it just really was that fabric that doesn't exist in the engine anymore for whatever reason. And then that bandit shirt really can't be modified for whatever reason. And then also, I guess I removed, let me review what all was done to this armor piece here. So for the armor piece that is in this heavy torso armor, what's the name of this armor? Here it is. So for that, the diffuse was removed, the index was set, and the gradient was set. And obviously that didn't really do much. I got to start using although it does look darker as a whole. It doesn't look like its normal blue self, so it is looking a little bit more tactical. And then for these sleeves, I do notice that I didn't really pay attention, but the gloves themselves, so the gloves are updated proper. Probably the thing that I'm finding annoying about them is that they look like leather gloves, which is not really the look that I was going for. But all in all, he's working fairly well. Again, minus the, obviously I'm going to change this balaclava color now that that's set up. So let's go in here and let's go back to the balaclava. And I guess like one of my favorite things now is like with all of these random textures that are like the wall textures and stuff like that, you end up with this like, you have all these different ones that could just be like extremely like dirty pattern, or like there's just so many fun ones that you probably come up with here. Take the W, man. And then you also, so there's a large number of ones that I've added that should just be flat colors. So if you want to just add a bunch of different flat colors to it, you can. But especially, I wish I could change the names. Hey, Christopher, welcome. This is an ongoing development for the engine that I haven't fully released the tools for everyone. There is a version available, and there'll be this newer version that I'm using right now available today on my Patreon support site, so that people can start making their own creations. I'm continuing to work on the actual back-end code, and so it's not fully ready to go public yet, but the version that's on the Patreon does work really well for its early purposes, and I'm going to release this version, like I said, here shortly today. Just kind of continuing this use case where I stream out. I'm just doing this. I'm trying to find the bugs as I go, so I'm just kind of trying to create and also just find how well everything's working as expected. Usually goes better if I actually try to show this off. I usually end up with more bugs that way, so it puts it to the test in front of everybody. Let's see if we can put a skull on here. Ooh, that one actually looks pretty cool. There is actually a, if we go in here to the, was it going to be occlusion? I think there's a couple of skulls in here. But then also, was it a mask? I think it might be a mask that also has, because they're adding one through the decals. So I'm trying to remember, is that an OPC? Yeah. This is where I wish I could actually like shift the actual texture that's being applied. But kind of the cool thing is that with all these different decals, you can actually, if you're looking for like some really cool black and white textures, you can actually just use, like that one's pretty sick. Get like a Punisher thing going on here. Let's just try this and see what happens. I like that it's got like the jaw right here on the mask. It's pretty cool. And then I wonder if you could apply a darker gradient to this. Like that. Let's see if that works. Not sure that will work or not, but And then for the torso, so in this case, going back to that torso, and obviously none of that worked. So if we go back to this torso armor, let's reset the torso armor, and then we'll remove the decal, and then let's go back in here. Because it's doing this index, instead of changing the diffuse, maybe let's just go in here and find a jet black one. And then to see how well it shows up, this was the one I was usually testing with, was this chemical puddle, to just kind of see what shows up underneath that on their shader. And then for the torso, we'll go in here and actually change the torso to something that might be a little bit easier to, and this would actually fit my cold weather a little bit better anyway. So we'll go back to torso, and then for this is also using a gradient. So if we go in here and set this to like, oh, I see. So the collar is on its own material. So we'll go in here to our collar. And, this is again where, you could turn off the collar altogether if you wanted to. But for this case, we'll leave the collar on. And let's try to change this to a darker color as well. Like that. And just see how that shows up in the code. And then we'll give them some sleeves. And we'll give them this heavy coat. Try to find one that works with that armor a little bit better. Like that. And then we'll set the color to this to be darker as well on both the sleeves. And then for the, what was the last thing? The gloves. So the gloves need a different spec map because they're like, they just need like a flat gray so they don't appear so shiny. Let's see how this does. Save. Oh, and then before we do that, let's get this shoulder pad. It's bugging me. Upper right. Yeah. Oh. Hey, Sizeman. Yeah, so I haven't had a chance. I've been streaming. I haven't had a chance to watch the new trailer yet, but I am seeing where a lot of people are commenting on that. Sounds like they're doing what they can to try to bring people back. Interesting. That's a different set of sleeves. And also, I'm really curious what that red is. There's something red showing up on the actual face mask. So that applied decal or something is actually red. Or maybe it's the gradient. Maybe the gradient isn't what I think it is. The gradients are probably going to be the thing that burns me the most. It's trying to figure out how to get that index. Ooh. Looks good though. And then the shoulder thing didn't turn off, so I do wonder if that one maybe can't be turned off. And then for the chemical thing, the interesting part is you can kind of see the chemical applied, so you can actually see a little bit of it along the spine there. So it is, that diffuse is working, but I think what's happening is that the rough and the speck and the gradient are actually overwhelming the actual color there. I do really like that mask. I'm curious though. I'm curious about the sleeves, because it's getting, maybe it's getting disabled by, no? They just, okay, interesting. Wonder why these specific sleeves don't show up. Just kind of picked a pair. Let's try these heavy ones, and then I'll need to pull the armor off because these clip. So for this, let's try to set this darker and see what happens, and then let's pull the armor off the arms there. That, or always we could, do these heavy pads instead. Remove the PK logo, and this will be another good use case for like how you can quickly make these appear shiny or dark. Let's try to apply a dark gradient to these. I'll apply a dark gradient to this one, and then to this one I'll actually change the spec and just see if that does anything. So then with the chemicals applied to this torso, if we remove the gradient, let's see if this shows up now. And then for the last thing is the mask. Let's go in here and say gradient, remove the gradient, and see what that does. Let's save. So the red still showed up on there. Let's go check out the rest of it. So the red is being applied by the decal, and that's interesting because it seems like so far everything that I've tried to apply that's a gradient, or not a gradient, but a decal that uses the white opacity, I think that needs probably a diffuse to set the color so that it doesn't end up being bright red like this. But so you can see that the chemical didn't actually show up even more. It's still getting blended in to everything else. And so that doesn't actually get shifted. This is supposed to be a different spec. This is supposed to be a different gradient. It doesn't look like those actually did much. And then with the gloves still look pretty leathery. So still getting there. Obviously you can still do a lot. It's just doing these very specific things. It's just kind of interesting to see what plays well and what doesn't. Hey, Lindro, how's it going today? Hope I said that right. So with the mask, let's see what's getting applied here. So we have a diffuse, which is the decal tattoo body, which is a mask. So what if we try to mix things up by doing like a gray material here, but then we'll do a mask. Don't know if that's actually going to show up or not. And I don't think it was the mask. What was I doing? I think I did an occlusion, which first let's see if the mask shows up. Because just because it doesn't show up on my shader doesn't necessarily mean it won't show up in the game. And then instead of doing like a flat, let's go in here and do something with a little bit more. Actually, let's do a white so let's see how well that stands out. And then for the torso, let's go in here and instead of just doing a chemical and letting these ones override it, let's see what's actually causing that to get overridden. So let's remove the occlusion and let's remove the gradient and see what, or the index, and let's see what happens. If you guys give me 1 second, I actually need to hit the head really quick. Be right back. I've lost my little BRB scene. Let me see. I'll just say text. Make this super cheesy. Sorry, y'all. It gets better with time. Everything's a process, right? Hey, Hacker, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I was indeed sitting here talking to myself. So the white worked, which is fun. If I could get it to the point where I could apply a mask, the part that is missing that I haven't shown yet is the ability to. I'm kind of running up against a technical challenge, which is that for every material that's applied to the object, I first tried to give you guys like the whole list of materials. That's a UX nightmare because opening like a thing to actually set that was just not helpful at all. I actually really like that. So that actually worked really well. That rust and everything applies really nicely to that. That didn't work. But you can see here that this darker shoulder pad actually looks pretty good too. Yeah, I actually really like that rust on that. I'm gonna have to save that as a variant of that one, along with this black one. That actually looks pretty good too. So the mask didn't apply. So anyway, what I was saying is that with the ability to apply a material to any one of these, the kind of the idea would be is that you'd be able to, and I see the chemicals did show up all over this. Matter of fact, I think with the index gone, it just no longer shows up, so the index is required. Anyway, no, that's not true. I still see it on there. It's still getting applied. It's still, something has turned the opacity of the diffuse like super low. If you could apply any material to any object, back to that thing that I was saying earlier about like the emissives, you could go in here and set an emissive property to anything to make it glow in the dark. But then for ones that have an index versus don't have an index, if you're writing your own custom ones, you could technically go in there and actually removing the index should do more. Versus I'm not sure, even though I'm setting it to null in the code, I don't know if that's actually applying. I don't know if that's actually applying to the engine. I mean, I'm sending it in, but I don't know if that actually goes in there and actually modifies that. But to that point, if you're trying to set like a mask over a material or a texture, if that material isn't set up to actually receive a mask texture, then it probably won't show up anyway. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this balaclava because this thing is sorely underutilized in the game currently for all the different military ops or renegades or bandits or whatever you could create that actually end up with like some decent looking ones. Like you can even add little ones that add different stripes and stuff. I'm excited. So the first step for 1.6 is going to be the bandit overhaul because I've been wanting to do that for quite a while. And I haven't done that because I've wanted to write this. So now that this is done, the bandit overhaul will be coming very shortly after that, where, you know, essentially, ooh, I love that. Garage stripes. Yeah, exactly. So I've got about 8 factions for the bandits that I've got worked out that I wanted to do. And then there's several additional factions for just the world that I've wanted to do for a while as well. And so all of those will be coming soon, which I'm excited about. See, like maybe I can figure out a way to add tags to these or something so that, like, I would want to actually tag this texture so that the search is able to find it easier, while still applying the original texture, obviously, to the material. It would be nice to have, like, you know, some actual, like, tag keywords or something that you could apply to these, so you can find them easier later. Because I'm not going to remember garage for a diffuse texture. Okay, so the goggles didn't work as far as the darker materials. So if we go in here and instead of doing the gradient, I think we should be able to get away with applying one to this because I don't think the diffuse actually does too much for this one. So even saying like, and then get rid of the gradient. And then for this torso armor, I'm really kind of at a loss for what to try next with this other than to, I mean, I'm really curious if you like remove the rough and you remove the spec, it's just got the normal map. And then you do something like this. Maybe find one that's, I mean, this is one of those cases where like a gradient would actually work really well. Because hopefully it's got some detail mixed into it that you can't really see, but it ends up applying a lot more of a shift rather than a flat color. But just for sake of argument, let's see if we can get this to be just like jet black, and then let's do like a different spec sheet here that will just make this, I mean, honestly, this is the one where I would actually keep the spec sheet, but I'm going to leave it off for now, just so we can see if that actually shows up proper. Hey, Kato. Welcome back. Thank you. I'm super excited to get some new creatures into the world. Some creations. Wish I could rotate this immediately. Save a lot of time. But yeah, hacker, that was one of the things as far as like even creating some of the E3 bandits. It's am I silent? Can you guys not hear me? Are you guys not able to hear me on that side? showing that Mike's working on this side. So that made that super shiny. Oh, okay. Thanks. Okay, so that actually worked. So setting that different material on there actually worked. And then obviously the balaclava worked, which I love that one. And I think it really helps to have that hat underneath there, that little layer there. I don't know why, but I really love that detail. And then with this metal effect, I'm guessing that's where, so the spec sheet must be doing a lot. Now, if we give it a different spec sheet, I think based on what I'm seeing here, you essentially maybe can't apply a direct color, but let's try one more time. Oh, so that's looking really good. Let's, instead of doing this flat black, let's actually go in here and say, because it's always hard to tell with this, like what it's actually doing. We'll give it most obnoxious colors we can come up with here. I wish I could, and see, that's the thing, is I actually want to make like different texture collections, so that you could have like different collections of ones that are kind of your go-to, so that if you want to apply specific patterns or, you know, different ones that you kind of want to know where they're located at all times, it's very easy. Let's try to apply something like that, and then set a spec to it and just see what happens. So we'll do like a dark spec and see if that turns the metallic look off. And then for the balaclava, I always want to go back to this because that sucker is a lot of fun actually. So we know that, well, we don't know, but the theory is that when applying either a mask or an occlusion or an opacity, these are set to red by default. So if we set an opacity, then we have to set maybe a gradient. That didn't work last time, so I'm not really. Let's just apply a couple of different things here and see if we can get the red to not show up. Let's even do like a darker rough on here. Just save a shit ton of layers on there and just launch and see what we get. Let's see, got a question. Make custom models using your tool for the Renegades and upload to the Nexus. You better. That's kind of the whole reason I designed it, is that you guys make creations. I want to see all sorts of stuff. So the online store, I'm trying to make it to where you guys can share your creations with each other. And so none of that worked for the red. But the hope is that you guys will start using this tool to design whatever the hell you want to make for the game. I really hope that everybody gives credit towards the Infinity Designer. I haven't seen a lot of these mods. You know, there's the like E3 Lawn replacement. There's the play as a volatile. There's a couple of model ones out there, and then obviously there's the texture replacement ones. But I'm hoping to see a whole generation of new ones that come out where you guys are using the tools to create whatever the hell you want to create for the game. I'm more than fine with that. I hope that everybody does give credit to the Infinity Designer, and you guys continue to use it for everything that it can get you. So there's just something about this like actual model that there really is like an opacity that's set on this material for the diffuse. So with that being said, probably the next thing to try, so nothing worked with the balaclava either. So probably the next thing to try is to actually go in here to the back to the torso armor, and let's just change the armor. Let's just change the material. So let's do like so those are some decals. Those are different armor ones. Character, bandit belt, studs, feathers. Lots of like, I wrote this little algorithm that's doing all this. Lots of decal ones for whatever reason. Yeah, exactly. So like, if I had more time, I would recreate, and I'm still planning to. I still want to recreate a colossal ton of the models that are in the base game, especially like the survivors and that kind of thing. Like, there's a whole bucket list of things that I've wanted to do for a while that I just haven't done yet. But absolutely, that's the entire intent of this work, is to give you guys tools to create whatever the hell you want to create inside the engine, and then get it into the game, hopefully without as much hassle as possible. It's interesting that it's claiming, so clearly I still have something to fix here, because obviously that material's not getting updated properly in this dropdown. So let's go in here and say PK man, PK torso A. Let's give it its armor back. And then, so it's going to be D, empty. I got to make that easier to read as well. Again, why I'm doing all this, so we can kind of see what works and what doesn't work. Instead of reading the name, I guess I could just look at the armor. Oh, that's right. Was this one of the ones that, I think this was one of the materials that I had to go seek out the actual, hang on one second. Man, PK, slowing me down for testing out all the things. Torso A, armor D. Oh, because that doesn't exist. So it had some, wasn't this one? Wasn't C, so okay. I have to start over really quick and see what's applied to this thing. So this is kind of like the root of like what I've been talking about, is like the model is called Torso A, Armor D. The material applied to it is Torso C, Armor F. Of course. Let's make sure all that's cleared out. And then for this, let's go switch this to this again. And I think what it's actually doing, I think this is where the issue is coming in, is that I think the code is actually, oh, that's a good one, is that you can't actually press over when you're searching something, because it'll go to my hotkey system and move the sliders. Cool. Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. So that's what I'm planning on setting up. That's why I Am Legion ended up with the launcher, so that you could select modules and everything. Is exactly right. All of these different module replacement packs and all of that's going to go into there, so that you can choose which replacements you want, if any, and expand the game however you want to. That's kind of the hope. So let's go in here and make sure that this is set to null. For this is going to be what was it? C armor F. Oh, come on. Man, PK, torso, C, armor, F. Hey, we did it. Okay. So then if we choose a diff like this, and then hit save, let's see if I shift, and let's actually just review this really quick and make sure it did that change. Yeah, so essentially you can see there briefly, it's that it's set up. So the way I'm setting it up, Cato, and Hacker Stalker and anybody else that's interested, essentially you're going to have an override folder. So you go to a specific folder and there's an override folder, and you can put whatever models into that folder, and then there'll be a texture override folder. And so you'll be able to see the changes for that model inside the engine in real time. So that way, if you want to go and design custom textures that you can upload into the game, if you want to design custom models that you're uploading into the game, all of that can be visualized immediately utilizing the engine. As far as new custom meshes, no, I haven't figured that out just yet. And there we go. So so literally that material itself has something that is causing the diffuse texture to have a lower opacity. And so by switching the material, it fixes that problem. So you can then set whatever texture you want along with whatever modifiers as well. So good news, everyone. That does work. So for example, if we actually then go in here and say, so let's reapply the spec. So we're going to do man, PK, torso, C. And then I guess let's go ahead and finish that. Armor, F. So let's go and reapply that so we get the shiny plates. And then we'll also do the same with the rough. God, I wish I have to fix that bug. The idea here is that in the future you'll be able to type in something here and then you press the different ones and it will automatically filter. So you don't have to, there's a bug in there right now, so I'm having to re-enter the different ones over and over again. Can't press over. I'm going to have to set that up to where if something's selected, it disables your ability to set the sliders. It's like the little feature that you're like, oh, this will be easy. You just, stand by, creates new type of chaos. So, and actually this one, so setting this to a skin, I'm still not sure about this, so we're gonna find this out together. Is setting an emissive on this material. There are specific ones that are set up for like the Tyrant and that kind of thing that do glow in the dark. But I'm not aware if all of them do that or if it's only very specific ones. So you have to kind of know which exact model or which exact ones actually cause the emissive to activate. So what we'll do here is we'll throw an emissive on here, and then I'll run into a dark building really quick, and we'll see if this shows up, because in the daylight it shouldn't show up, and then at night it should show up. So glow in the dark armor will be coming soon as well. I know some people want that. And so then for this, we can change it to daytime so I can kind of see now. We'll give it like, I wanted like something like this, like some rusty ass, like old armor, even like discarded in the mud armor. some ragtag militia armor that glows in the dark. And then for the balaclava, let's go in here and say, Kato, if they hire me, I'll work for them, but they haven't offered that. I've offered my services to them, but they have not hired me yet, so not much I can do about that one. So we know now that the occlusion, not the occlusion, so the opacity ones, these are red. So anyone that you set, and based on what I was seeing with, let's try an index. Let's try an index camo. I mean, based on what I was seeing, so is this. So, because this should show up red. Let's just test out. Let's find out. Let's see how that muddy or dirty armor looks, and then well, Hacker, I know that I've turned on emissives on different creatures by setting the materials. The weapon system is a completely different system, which sad. I wish they had actually made those systems closer, because I could then make custom weapon textures and everything pretty quick. But it sounds like that module is going to have to take a little bit more time. But for this, essentially, all you have to do is change the material property, and the material itself self-activates. So by setting a material, just because it says EMS on my shader only means that it's accounting for the potential of a potential EMS slot, but it doesn't mean that it's actually working in the game. So you can see there that camo is a mask. So far all masks and all opacity and occlusions are red. And so I have to figure out how to set that to how to set that color on those. But you can see that my muddy armor is now working. So we now have kind of this like discarded, mud-soaked armor, which, depending on how much love you want to put in, if you want to make teams of bandits or whatever actually out in the floodlands or in the woods later when we get some actual content where there's water, bodies of water, you could actually make by region enemies that look a specific way based on the armor they're wearing. So actually going to each one of these armor plates and making each one look muddy could actually add a lot of depth for your enemies, so that they look like they've been out in the wastelands for a while. They don't have this like fresh gear. It's the same gear. It's just got some, exactly, over to Kato, exactly right. It's got some wear and tear to it. So let's head into a dark environment really quick and see. I think I'm in the story, but I think I can go, aha. I noticed this a while back. I was actually kind of shocked that they had this in here. So if we go to photo mode, no. So it really is specific. So like if I set like a tyrant material on this, and then I change all of the settings, or like an eyeball one, you could actually make that glow, I'm pretty sure. I have to test that, but there's no reason I believe it wouldn't work. So next, let's go in here and say, let's actually try to create a color shift for the balaclava here. It's all learning. We're all doing it together now. Still some bugs I need to work out, but just getting this to work. There was a bug that I fought for days, which is why I've been largely quiet. But now that I've got that bug fixed, with the materials, it's all upward from here. So for this, I think we already discovered you can't set the index on this material. So for this, let's set, I think I already tried this though. I think I already tried to set like a gradient. So actually, let's see if Techland will give me the answers. So if we go in here and we say specifically for the camo, I'm not sure they ever actually apply the camo, but I know they apply like skull decals. The question is, so there's like a skull material. Here's an occlusion texture. So they're just setting on a camouflage. So potentially the material itself is setting that to the correct property. So we currently have the balaclava material on there. It's got the balaclava normal. So maybe the solution is let's change this to something like, even with this wrestler, so they have so these are all the different wrestler ones. Those should receive, or not, I guess they're all diffused. They set all those up with diffused textures. But I think like with the Renegade masks, these are set up to receive, and even those look sick. Just having that Renegade mask texture applied. So let's clear the changes. And then let's go here. Let's try to set special mask. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, so this is something I got to fix before I release this next update, is that this panel is not getting its update, which I think essentially all I need to do is, if I stop running, I've been making this one character for forever. The game's been running for a minute, or the engine. That's not getting its update, so it's going to be difficult to test that out. So what I'll do is, and let's see, I think I was seeing earlier there was definitely a bug with setting this, or doing the save, because the material properties were not all getting reapplied. I think there's with the way I'm setting the materials, I think there was an issue with reapplying all of those variations. So if we go in here, hit save, we can see here in the presets that it is getting saved, which I'll try to add a timestamp to as well for the custom folder, so that way it has different versions, so you're not just saving over the same file over and over again. It's actually getting timestamped, so you can make different versions and test different things. The hope is that eventually you can just go here and, press, see, like, that didn't reapply everything. Yeah, so I still have some work there where it's got all the data stored, I'm sure, to where it's in the actual data file. It's just not getting reapplied to all of the materials here. But I guess a way to test that is to say commit my changes for Aiden, and then let's see, I guess that would only really work. No, technically that'll work. I just hit save. So then these changes, it is going through and changing the slots because it's dynamically building the slots every time. So sadly, those don't immediately line up. So yeah, it's kind of hard to tell what stuck and what didn't. But I guess what I can do, I see a lot of changes here in here. So I am guessing that it is just literally a bug with my reapply. So what we'll do is we'll just hit launch real quick and just see if all those changes are applied to the actual model. And the original goal is that for each change that you made, you would save it to a variation. And then that way, at any time, you could reapply it through applying a variation index. But I recently changed that with this material bug that I was getting to where now it's just trying to, helmet's gone. So let's hit load. Now it's just trying to modify everything and get every modification that you've made, because I didn't like the flow of having to go through to each variation or to each thing and save a variation and reset the model and set the variation, and it was just kind of tedious. So I wanted to do quick edits like you guys were seeing earlier, and that is working for the most part. It's just the flow from start to finish. So it looks like it did keep. Yeah, it basically got everything, but for some reason the hands and the gloves and the helmet, for whatever reason, are no longer showing up, which could either be, and the foot stuff. This is actually looks like it's the older one. It didn't get, which that part is actually not right. So if we go here, let's clear everything. If we load that one, and then we go here, I think there might actually be, and I was noticing this earlier, so if you guys want to see some of the like backend code, so I've created this preset loader, and going through each and every single freaking thing is a pain in the ass and getting all these shots. But I did notice when I was doing this that essentially some of them, the JSON data is loading correctly, but lately in my sliders, it's no longer setting every single value correctly. So I may have to redo my code for loading the different things. But this is actually it's taking the screenshots right now for a weekend. Oh, hey Gavin. So they made it free to play for the next couple of days so they can get more people on there. But when you load the actual JSON, it gets all of these different things. But when you load the sliders, or when you load it onto the sliders, some of the things from the JSONs are no longer being loaded in for whatever reason. And so I'm going to have to review the slider code to see why every detail is not being loaded in. And you can see here, yeah, that I am getting a lot of warnings, and I'm getting, so this is probably, oh, that's where it's saving the image. But there are several variation slider not found. Yeah, so there's a couple little things here and there that it's catching that I'm going to have to fix. But you can see, like, especially with like the wrestlers, there's still a lot of material things, but then there's also things like whatever meshes here that it's getting set on some, not getting set on the others. So I've still got some steps to go to get everything loading and updating properly, as you guys can see. But the tool itself is becoming incredibly robust as far as all the different things you can actually pull off in the code. It's just a matter of continuing to polish and refine some of the UX and some of the back-end code to make this thing truly powerful for how you guys want to use it. So looking forward to getting your guys' next round of feedback. I'll be releasing this version here today onto the Patreon. so that I can get my next round of feedback. The last version was 0.3a. This is essentially 0.7. So I've been working on the back end for a little bit, trying to get all this. 1.0 is when it'll get released to the public. And so it's still got some polish. It's still got some things to go through before I think, I mean, mainly it's just where I don't want to, the amount of bug reports or the amount of feedback, things that I would kind of probably already know about, that it wouldn't actually, it would probably frustrate a lot of people early on. There's still a lot of things I can do to refine that. And so I really appreciate the supporters I have on Patreon, and I want to get this out to them as soon as possible. But I also just know that people want to make awesome stuff and not have it not work properly for them. So still working through it to try to get the best results out to you guys. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. It's been about 3 hours now. I'm going to go take a break and continue to refine some of this code and then get it out to you guys on the Patreon. So thank you guys so much for joining me and for hanging out. And I look forward to seeing what the updates look like for Dying Light 2. I look forward to hearing back from you guys on this upcoming release. And I'm especially excited to see all the awesome creations you guys put together. I don't have the kind of time to sit there and mess around in here like I should while I'm also writing the code. So it will be something that I look forward to seeing everybody's creations and what they come up with. Hey, Fear, thanks for joining the channel. The early release idea is, there's a couple of things. First is making sure that I've been giving Techland time to respond. I haven't heard anything from them yet as far as their thoughts on this tool. I wanted to give them that moment to get ahead of it if that was going to be a problem. Haven't heard anything, so I think we're good there. As far as the release goes, yes, but it would be good to get a lot of feedback at the same time. I want to make sure to iron out as many things that I'm already aware of first before releasing to the public, so that I have a little bit better gauge on the feedback that I'm getting, so it's more actionable, just because I'm aware of a lot of the issues that are still in there from using it myself. And so I don't want to really release something that I'm going to get a ton of bug reports on while people are using it, especially if it's not serving. For example, all that work that I just did on the live channel to create that character, technically this guy should load in properly. He does kind of load in properly in the engine. He doesn't fully load in here, while I know all that data is saved onto that JSON file. So it's little things like that I want to make sure that I have some of those things fixed and ironed out before it goes public, just because I don't want people pouring in a ton of hours into work, as I know the creatives for this modding community will do. I'm very similar in that regard. So I just want to make sure that the tools work how they need to before doing that. But thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate you guys hanging out, and look forward to giving you guys another update here shortly. Thanks, and stay tuned for more. Happy gaming.